He was a man who seemed like the perfect neighbor, a business owner, a volunteer, and a man who dressed as a clown to entertain children at local hospitals and community events. But beneath the painted smile was a monster, and according to reports, between 1972 and 1978, John Wayne Gacy murdered at least 33 young men and boys, making him one of the most prolific and disturbing serial killers in American history. This is the story of the man the world would come to know as the Killer Clown. John Wayne Gacy Jr. was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois. The middle child of three, raised in a modest working-class home. From the outside, his childhood looked normal, but inside that home, life was filled with fear and violence. His father, John Stanley Gacy, was a World War I veteran, but also an alcoholic prone to fits of rage. He often beat his son, calling him names like sissy and mama's boy. Gacy's mother, Marion, was kind but powerless to stop the abuse. Gacy would spend the rest of his life trying to earn the approval of a man who only gave him hatred. He also suffered from health problems. He had a heart condition and frequent blackouts that kept him out of sports. At school, he was bullied and isolated, but even then, he learned to hide pain behind a smile, a skill he would one day use to deadly effects. By the early 1960s, Gacy seemed to have turned his life around. He worked hard, got married, and started a family. His wife, Marlon Myers, was the daughter of a wealthy businessman in Iowa. Together they had 2 children and moved into a comfortable home. To the outside world, Gacy was the perfect husband and father, involved in the church, business, and local politics. But behind closed doors, the same darkness from his youth began to surface. According to reports, in 1968, everything changed. Gacy was arrested and convicted for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, he only served 18 months. He was released in 1970 for good behavior. When he walked out of prison, his wife divorced him, his father had just died, and the man who once seemed so ordinary was gone forever. Gacy returned to Chicago and started over. He opened a construction company called PDM Contractors, hiring young men who were either runaways or kids from troubled backgrounds to work for him. He attempted to rebuild his public image by becoming a local success story. He joined the Democratic Party, volunteered in the community, and even had his photo taken with First Lady Rosalind Carter in 1978. And then there was the clown. Gacy created 2 clown characters, Pogo and Patches. He entertained children at parties, parades, and hospitals. The costume gave him power, attention, and a mask to hide his true nature. The smile painted on his face wasn't for joy, it was for control. And according to reports, between 1972 and 1978, John Wayne Gacy would lure young men and teenage boys to his home in Norwood Park Township, just outside Chicago, to promise them work, money, or simply a safe place to hang out. But once inside, Gacy had a routine, one that became known as his handcuff trick. He would produce a pair of police handcuffs, claiming to show them a clown magic trick. He would cuff himself, slip out easily, then convince his victim to try. Once the cuffs were on, there was no escape. Then came the torture, the sexual assault, and finally, strangulation with a rope or a wooden board twisted around the victim's neck. What Gacy chillingly called the rope trick. He buried 29 of his victims beneath his own home, in a cramped crawl space under the floorboards. When he ran out of room, he dumped others into the Des Plaines River. For years, neighbors complained about the smell. Gacy blamed it on sewage problems. All the while, he continued to smile, hosting block parties, working in politics, and performing as Pogo the Clown. He lived above his victims, slept above them, and no one suspected a thing. Until it all began to unravel on December 11, 1978. And according to reports, Robert Peast, a 15-year-old boy working at a local pharmacy, told his mother he was going to meet a man about a construction job. That man was John Wayne Gacy. And when Robert never came home, his family reported him missing immediately. Police began looking into Gacy's background and quickly found his prior conviction for sexual assault. They obtained a search warrant, and what they discovered would horrify the nation. Inside Gacy's home, investigators found personal items belonging to several missing young men. They also noticed something strange. the overwhelming stench coming from beneath the house. Over the next several days, officers dug through the crawl space. And what they uncovered was beyond comprehension. Body after body, shallow graves packed beneath the floorboards. And by the end of the excavation, police had discovered 29 sets of human remains on Gacy's property. 4 more would later be recovered from the nearby river, and when confronted with the evidence, Gacy broke down. He confessed to the murders, calmly explaining how he'd buried the bodies and how he'd killed them. He told police that he had moments of total insanity, but other times he was completely normal. He claimed that a darker personality, an alternate self, committed the murders. But investigators knew the truth. John Wayne Gacy wasn't insane. He was meticulous, calculated, and fully aware of what he was doing. Gacy's trial began in February 1980. His defense argued insanity and that he had multiple personalities, including the killer Jack. The prosecution countered that he was in complete control, and the evidence was overwhelming. And after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict, guilty on all 33 counts of murder. Nevertheless, on March 13, 1980, John Wayne Gacy was sentenced to death. He would spend the next 14 years on death row, painting portraits of clowns and giving interviews where he blamed everyone but himself. And on May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection at the Stateville Correctional Center. His final meal was fried chicken, French fries, Coca-Cola, and strawberries. His final words was "kiss my ass." And, at 12:58 a.m., John Wayne Gacy was pronounced dead. Outside the prison, a crowd of hundreds gathered, some holding signs that read "No tears for the clown." Even in death, Gacy's legacy continues to haunt others. His home was demolished in 1979, but the land remains infamous, a symbol of hidden evil in suburban America. And over the years, investigators have continued to identify his victims using DNA and forensic genealogy. However, as of today, several remain unknown. John Gacy's case changed the way law enforcement tracks missing persons and how society understands psychopathic killers. He wasn't the shadowy stranger. He was the man next door, a smiling face hiding unimaginable darkness. Now, as always, we would like to know what you think about this video down below in the comments section. Also, don't forget to like the video, share the video, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Until next time, peace.